The Urbanist is brought to you in association with the Department of Culture and Tourism, Abu Dhabi. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is a beacon of hope and inspiration. A catalyst to spark growth and collaboration with museums and experiences, where art and science and nature and technology coexist.
The belief of Abu Dhabi that culture is the backbone of our society.
Stay tuned for a special episode of the show, in which you can hear His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa Al Mubarak explain exactly why and how Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is the perfect place to collaborate, create and innovate. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi, proud partner of The Urbanist on Monocle Radio.
An outwardly unremarkable tower block in Croatia's capital has a tale to tell. Formerly the bustling home to an iconic Yugoslav newspaper, the Vjesnik skyscraper is now bereft of workers and facing an uncertain future. You're listening to Tall Stories, a Monocle production brought to you by the team behind The Urbanist. I'm Carlotta Rebello. In this episode, Guy Launey tells us more about this otherwise overlooked piece of Zagreb's urban environment.
The Vjesnik skyscraper won't win any prizes for looks. It's a glass and concrete slab with windows tinted to take the edge off the heat and glare of the sun. And to be fair, that can be pretty fierce in a Zagreb summer. It's not much of a skyscraper either. Just 16 stories overhang the base, which sports a ground floor and a mezzanine. Its location in the city is far from the best, marooned on the side of one of the main routes through Zagreb, where Zagrebačka Avenue runs into Slavonska Avenue. You wouldn't notice the difference between the two roads. It's the same sprawl of multiple lanes of ill-tempered traffic. The banks of the River Sava and the charms of the lower town remain tantalisingly out of reach. And it looks distinctly rough, not just around the edges, but pretty much everywhere. The scuffed, tinted windows make it look like the building is covered in rust, though locals affectionately nicknamed it the Chocolate Tower because of its brown-hued, segmented appearance. But when it opened in 1972, the Vjesnik skyscraper was a powerful symbol of what was, at that point, the world's most successful socialist country. Tito's Yugoslavia was modern, forward-looking and relatively free, even if it was somewhat light on actual democracy. Its passport was widely welcomed to the west and east, and the strength of the Yugoslav dinar gave its holders considerable purchasing power. Opening a modern headquarters for one of its leading media outlets was a form of broadcasting, and the message was, "Aren't we doing well?" Its architect, Anton Ulrich, took inspiration from across the Atlantic. Lever House in New York, to be precise, the Big Apple's first all-glass office building, which continues to grace Park Avenue between 53rd and 54th Streets. It took 9 years to bring that style to Zagreb, with Yugoslav authorities trumpeting the Vjesnik skyscraper as one of the most modern high-rise buildings in all of Europe. Its reinforced concrete construction allowed for spacious open-plan offices, ideal for the newsroom of one of Yugoslavia's most prestigious publications. All of this was lavished on Vjesnik because it was in on the ground floor of Tito's rise to power. In fact, it was nothing short of the house journal of the partisan movement. Vjesnik means courier, and in its early days, the newspaper brought Yugoslavs word of the resistance as the partisans fought back against the Nazi occupation and their genocidal Croatian allies, the Ustasha. Publication started in 1940, just a year before German forces invaded and forced the teenage King Peter II into exile. By August 1941, Vjesnik had really hit its stride, with the front page declaring "Smrt fašizmu, sloboda narodu," death to fascism, freedom for the people. That slogan resonated around Yugoslavia and soon became the motto of the entire resistance movement. To this day, you can see variations painted on walls in cities across the various countries that used to make up Yugoslavia. It's usually offering a comment on the divisive nationalist rhetoric that's brought a depressing amount of electoral success to political parties across the region. All that seemed an unlikely prospect during Vjesnik's heyday. After the war, with Tito firmly in control, it became one of Yugoslavia's most widely read publications. The circulation passed the 100,000 mark and even expanded to other countries. Vjesnik set up an operation in Frankfurt to serve the Yugoslavs working as Gastarbeiters in West Germany, with this special edition adding another 5 figures to the circulation numbers. But you won't be surprised to hear that the demise of Yugoslavia wasn't good news for a paper so strongly associated with the Tito era. As a nationalist-stoked conflict ripped the country apart, it was bitterly ironic when Vjesnik fell under the sway of Croat nationalist leader Franjo Tudjman. In its opposition to the very concept of a united Yugoslavia, his HDZ party often acted as an apologist for the wartime Nazi puppet independent state of Croatia. And now Tudjman had control of the media outlet that had played a significant role in the defeat of the Ustasha. To say that Vjesnik's credibility took a hit would be an understatement. The perception that it had become little more than a mouthpiece for Tudjman and the HDZ was disastrous for sales. By the early years of the 21st century, it was selling fewer than 10,000 copies. And by the time Sandra Perkovic was winning gold at the London Olympics in 2012, it was no longer possible to read all about it in Vjesnik. The end of the newspaper meant the skyscraper which called it home became something of a Zagreb zombie. From housing as many as 20 newspapers at its peak, these days the only occupant of note is the radio station Laganini FM, still hanging on the 15th floor. Now the question is, what comes next? Can the building be repurposed for future creative endeavours, or is it doomed to decay like so much confectionery that's past its sell-by date? Split ownership makes it a vexed issue. The Croatian state now owns about 6/10 of the Vjesnik skyscraper, but it has little interest in proposals to convert it into a hotel and conference centre. Some co-owners of the building are keen to create apartments in the tower, while government ministries have their eye on the open-plan spaces to use for their archives. There are also proposals to create what's been described as a modern business centre, but the Ministry of Spatial Planning notes that the consent of all co-owners is required to undertake extraordinary work and major interventions. So it's hard to be optimistic about the future of the Chocolate Tower. Like many of Yugoslavia's iconic buildings, it remains in danger of melting into history.
Tall Stories is a Monocle production from the team behind The Urbanist. This episode was written by Guy Launey and produced and edited by David Stevens. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive new episodes every week. I'm Carlotta Rebello. Goodbye, and thank you for listening, City Lovers.